Hello, we're just going to talk about making cultures better. Yesterday we talked about trying to make goblinoids like the epitome of evil and coming up with ideas, but you guys know the deal. We just world build here. Um, we try to top off with some mind fuel and get it started. So let's get the intro going and then just get right on into it. A little bit of a delay. You guys know the deal. When you're live streaming and you're just by yourself and you have issues, the technical issues, anyway, those who know. Um, yeah. I'm a graybeard grognard geek. You guys know the deal. Um, so anyway, today we're going to talk about cultures, and I love doing this unprepped, unscripted because it flexes the improvisational toolkit that I have by just putting myself on the chopping block, and also to uh, make mistakes and things like that. Well, technically, you're late because I'm late. So you're the first one in. So thank you very much for being here. Actually, let me put the chat window over here. Hey, Glue Stick. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you very much. I don't remember if how long it's been, but whatever. Today we're just going to talk about making better cultures, and this sparked because of this seasonal debate we always have about evil goblinoids. You know, orcs, bugbears, goblins, hobgoblins, and things like that in fantasy gaming, and the idea that the book says they're evil, so they're just evil, and then we just don't go further than that, or making them interesting. Now, of course, in today's climate, we talk about wokeism and why do all the evil creatures out there need to have personalities, and now they're best friends and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and this was going to be one point I was going to bring up. Thank you, Drew. Drew's always ahead of me. That for simplicity's sake, as game designers in the past, remember when like race was class? Like you either played an elf, or you played like a magic user, you played a dwarf, or you played a thief and whatnot. And it's gotten better since then. And I think even casual gamers understand the difference between like who you are and your upbringing. And I think in world building, even with all the new 5e derivatives, even 5th edition itself has changed the idea that, okay, you're going to pick your species, and we have things like species, lineage, heritage, biology. We have a lot of other words to use other than race because our geekosphere understands that the word race really doesn't actually describe what it means. So you have your biology and then where you're from. And I think in world building, we love ourselves, our little distressed maps and whatnot, and placed in and around those things, we can design cultures and overlay that with the sentient beings that exist in our world, including the goblinoids, the orcs, and things like that. Like I mentioned yesterday, it's perfectly fine in your world to have despicable people, but they don't need to be related to only like hobgoblins, right? Maybe, the what did I say? Thegus Prime or some crap like that, right? Where it was like, oh well, maybe up in the north, the people that belong to the Thegus Prime culture are despicable people, but maybe there's hobgoblins and humans and elves and then orcs and ogres, and they all belong to that culture and act that way. And then in your world, when people want to murder kill these the uh, those subjects from that culture. It's not just, oh well, all the hobgoblins act that way. No, maybe a lot of humans that move up there and are born and raised in that culture may also be the exact same way. Oh, thank you. Yeah. There are music options, and you guys know, like my intros, I change them all the time and whatnot. I think it's called world music, and I'm always I I don't like dead air, and I like to have something in the background. So yeah, yes. For my Weitstein setting, I have, for example, the Caliban culture with orcs, humans, trolls, and many more as part of a seafaring raider culture similar to Vikings. Exactly, exactly. And I think sometimes one of the things that we seriously, you know what? It wasn't until recently. Thank you very much for the super chat. My glue stick says goblins have always been fae. That's their origin in folklore. In D&D, there's the magical blue-skinned or blue-nosed goblins with magical powers. What? I've never heard of that in D&D. I mean, I know in folklore it's been that way. And the I think it wasn't till this 2024 monster manual they actually mentioned that goblins are fae creatures, which I always was like, it's easy, just call them fae and you're done. But I don't know, whatever. And again, I've always pointed out, like, one of the other issues about making them better in the context of our tabletop gaming is that players want to play those monstrous races, right? You want to play dark elves and tieflings and goblins and orcs and half orcs and things like that. So I think it behooves us to make them better. And not only, when I say better, I mean interesting. And I was going to write some notes down. I didn't even have time to make those notes because I was having some background issues technologically. But I do think that I don't remember them. What is this? Was like this 3.0 era? Because I've got a dead spot in my 3.0 era for goblins and things. Blue skin. I mean, I don't mind. You could make them all kinds of ways. They look and sound different and whatnot. So for cultures, if we just take a look at our real world cultures, and I don't want to say overlay them, but the little factors that we find that make different cultures interesting and unique and whatnot, I think we can layer that in our own cultural building and come up with reasons for conflict and friction between two peoples without making them evil, and still have room for adversarial conflict. And the reason why we want to have adversarial conflicts is because conflict breeds drama, drama breeds adventure, right? We have many examples of peoples who have different cultural biases, and that friction creates fear and uncertainty, and then a simple byproduct of that is anger and destruction. Things we don't know that make us scared or we have misunderstandings about. Usually the best way to solve that is lizard brain. Let's crush that thing. I don't understand what it is. I don't want to take the time to understand it. Let me grab a stick and crush that thing. And so let me give you a shotgun view of how I look at creating cultures and making them different. So let's start at the very tail end of a culture. Let's talk about end of life. Death rites are numerous in our human lands, and I think we could use those to describe death rites in other cultures. I know we love ourselves some undead and having cemeteries, but that's not actually the norm worldwide. Death rites come in all shapes and forms, and we've seen this in our own medieval fantasy and literature and things like that, where there's death at sea with ocean-faring people, and we have a version of that where people are placed in a boat and then it's lit on fire. So we use water to when it comes to death rites. We use fire when it comes to death rites as well. Gluestick says, my super easy way to give them fake qualities. They are obsessed with repairing shoes. Stop it. Stop it. They will pause whatever they're doing to repair and polish some shoe buckles. They have no choice. They are fae. Yeah. We'll have to do an episode on fae, right? Because there's some interesting folklore, and you start to mix and match some of the folklore. I almost feel like you could make a random, a compound random list of like fae tropes and behaviors that are good, bad, interesting, complicated, comical. There was World of Darkness had a not Changeling. There was another one that I'd have to get it off my shelf. Fae creatures during the Middle Ages. Anyway, World of Darkness. Instead of the modern age, it was in the past, and characters could, in general, gain powers by making promises, and they were called wood, stone, and iron promises. And there were those really strange fae aspects that you couldn't resist because you made the promise to do the thing. Oh yeah. Like when I say a compound list, like you take a random, let's go D10, right? You take 10 qualities on one side of a list, 10 qualities on the other side of the list, and you can compound them. So you roll multiple times across that list. So the first list might be, you do it by time, right? So you go like every time I see, every full moon, at dawn, when placed on a ledge, like you have a circumstance, and then after that you have the action. So like one could be during the rising sun, and then you have 10 options, like I must clean a innocuous object, or things like that, right? I can't, I must hide from everyone's view for at least 1 hour, or strange things like that. I must gather fruits and vegetables and leave them on a family stoop, or whatever. Things like that. Anyway, the other part about cultures, so end of life, water, fire, earth, of course, burning people's bodies. There are many things, like, for example, there are cultures that have hung bodies from trees and mountains. What is the respect given to the dead? Like, what happens when people aren't given those death rites? Do they come back from the dead if they aren't given those death rites? And what happens to culturally family and friends? For example, you could have a culture that mummifies their people, and then if for some reason that death rite is not completed, maybe they come back from the dead as mummies and whatnot, and it's different for them. But death rites are a thing. What kind of respect is given to the people that die? Sometimes there are certain honorifics given to how someone dies. Is it more honorable to die in battle? Is it more honorable to die from old age? Things like that. Drew says the death rite in the Caliban culture is to eat the dead. Yep. After all, the orcs and trolls are not meat anyway, and of course it shows how starvation is part of their life. And types of cannibalism have been performed throughout our own human history, not in the way we think of, like in horror movies, like zombification, but the drinking of blood. And again, there's that friction, right? If you're in that culture, you go, I don't understand what the problem is. They're passing on their power, their skills, their experiences, and we're drawing it into our own bloodline for that to exist, and in a magical world that may be true. Whereas the culture on the, across the river is going like, that's pretty foul. They're barbaric, right? And that's where the barbarism thing comes from. Every culture around the world has looked at an outside culture and considered those otherings a problem, and that's where where we can both have conflict and not make the othering make them evil. They don't have to be evil, they're just different, you know. That's how my new RPG works. You are basically already writing expansions for it. Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, I will die from old age while in battle. Yeah, yeah. I mean, death rights are one thing for cultures, um, but moving back from that, uh, how does going from the end of life? How are the elderly handled in that culture? What I mean is, um, if you are just older, are you considered wiser and respected, or are you hanging around too long and, and you're just ignored? Are older individuals in that culture, do they tend to have a higher status, especially in a very academic or oracle or storyteller culture? Even in tribalistic and nomadic cultures, if you're older, you're very well respected, highly respected, because you've been around long enough to see the seasons change and the environment change, and we need to learn from you. So are older people respected? We can go the opposite way. It's like, hey, old dude, we're doing all the work and you're just sitting down. Like, you need to get your ass up. And there's been like, cinematically, there have been like, the older people that don't want to go out without like holding a weapon in their hand. There was a whole storyline that followed Thor from the Marvel comic books about an old man who was still believed in the Viking culture, and in that it was actually a small story, but it expanded really wide, and it was just one-off comic book where an old Viking summoned Thor. He literally prayed to Thor, and Thor, the Marvel character, showed up and was like, "Hey, dude, like, you're one of the last ones that believe in us as gods." And the old man was like, "Listen, I'm frail and dying, but I don't want to die sitting on the hill from old age. Like, I want to die with a weapon in my hand." And Thor, there's some other parts into it because Odin had a little bit to do with it. But anyway, the old man had like a spear or something like that, and a little sprig of mistletoe was just like rubbed on the spear, and this old man became this like powerhouse dude who was like, "I want to die in battle." And him and this old man and Thor battled a dragon or something like that, and the old man died. He ended up dying in battle, and Thor was sad because he's like, "Oh man, he was like one of the last ones that actually believed in us as gods." And then come to find out that the Valkyries came down and took that old man across the Valhalla, and then he became a recurring character in the Deadlands of Valhalla, where they were having battles over and over again. And him and Thor became really good friends, even though the guy had passed away. But long story short, sorry about that segue, but it was an amazing storyline, because here was this basically rando NPC that ended up becoming a really great character with great personality and storyline and whatnot, because it was like, "I want to die in battle." Imagine that culture in conflict with another culture that is more academic, and it's like, that's pretty brutal. You send your old people out into the woods to go die, and they're like, "Yeah, I don't understand what the problem is," Oh man. But there a handful. Here's another shotgun things to use for cultures. Food. We love ourselves some food, and one of the easiest ways to mix cultures is to invite someone to the table for some food. And how do you eat? Right? Do you sit at a table? Do you cross your legs and sit on the floor and eat? Do you share one? Is it different types of ways to describe here in the States for eating? Each person has their own plate, and then they eat their own food. You have family style, where you have a lot of different items in front of you, and each person just grabs things and pull it to their own plate. There is the idea of buffet style, where away from the table, there's a number of things. You walk over, grab what you want, fill your plate, come sit down, and then you hang out and eat. There's also the idea of just one giant plate of food and everyone just grabs it with their hands and eat. I mean, do you eat with your hands, or chopsticks, or knife and fork? Who gets to eat first? What is the food that the people eat that's in their location and whatnot. I'm from the East, born and raised on the East Coast of the United States, so I love seafood. I love shellfish. I love regular food. I love seafood, flounder and tilapia, catfish. It goes on and on and on. Now I live Midwest. I'm Central Ohio, and I start talking about eating fish, and you see people are like, oh, it makes me want to vomit. Fish breathe in their own feces, as I was told by one coworker or whatnot, right? And so even food that you eat is and how you eat it. Do the older people get fed first? Do the warriors get fed first? Maybe the elders are fed first. Do you say a prayer? Do you just sit the hell down and start filling your mouth with as much food as possible? What kind of conversations happen over meals, if any? In a very brutal landscape of a world, it could be that you eat on the run. Like, we don't even sit down. We're looking over our shoulders. We're just like, eat fast. Come on, hurry up. We gotta go. Whereas maybe there's other cultures that sit back and relax, and you lay back on chaise lounges and just eat one little thing at a time. And the PCs are like, all right, we've already had our long rest. Can we finish this up? Yeah. The goblins in D&D have had their own pantheons usurped by a tyrannical god, not originally their own. Yes, that's another, I don't want to say weirdism. It's when you have the gods as the progenitors of races and taking them over and whatnot, then you're like, well, there's an outside force making these beings a certain way, and but listen, there are no D&D police out there, right? You can do whatever the hell you want to. I'm not saying you're wrong, because what was it? Let's see, Groomsh was the God. Oh man, I hate canon. All right, Groomsh was the one-eyed god who got his eye poked out by one of the elven gods, and then Groomsh was all pissed off about it because the other guys kind of like laughed it off or something. It was really weird. Anon says there was an old post on Story Games which framed culture based on your relationship with its precepts. Do you deny, adopt, question, defend them, etc. I love that kind of. I love those. I knew you would bring. I knew you would bring the knowledge there, Aderlin. Yeah. Cultures are very interesting to me because a lot of times it's shaped by your environment, right? Like if you live in a swamp, your culture is going to be much different than if you live in Arctic land or a coastal region or in a desert or something like that, jungles and whatnot. It's going to be shaped by your shelter, your food, your sustenance. How dangerous is the place? Do you have enough time? As we know in our cultures around the world, the greater you have the ability to keep yourself safe, the more time you have to pursue other endeavors, right? So you can go from moving around and being nomadic to staying still, and then once you stay still and you have a lot of safety, then you can start engaging in things like schools and medicine and philosophy. Whereas if your culture is constantly being besieged by dangerous things, sometimes you don't even have the time or tendency to sit back and relax and have things happen. Like classically in Dungeons and Dragons, we know that elves and dwarves live a long time, and there's often the seasonal question of, well, wait a minute, if they're ancient and my human player character is like 15 years old, why do I have the same skill capabilities as like a 70-year-old elf that looks the same age as my character? And the idea could be, well, there's no time pressure involved, right? If your 15-year-old barbarian character existed in, I don't know, what was the Spartan era of Greece or something, like your ass needs to step up and become kill a wolf and become Leonidas, right? Because long before you became a Spartan, they were tossing your brothers and sisters off of cliff sides because, some dude was like, hey, you've got a birthmark, toss off a cliff, right? So The only reason you're alive is because you survived a harsh crucible. That 70-year-old elf, they might have been like, to learn archery, you must contemplate on this one arrow for 2 months' time, then report back with your thoughts. And then they just sit there staring at the arrow for 60 days before they write a dissertation on it, right? Whereas your 14-year-old was just like plinking arrows because if you didn't eat, you know? So sometimes time pressure has a lot to affect cultures, and the respect that those cultures give to the individuals in their culture. And also the opposite, like, what does a culture dislike? Like, Anon brought up this idea of like, do you deny or adopt, question or defend an aspect of your culture? Is it what is it? Confront, adapt, overcome, or something like that. I know I butchered it from the military. Or is the culture very, very traditional and they don't want change at all? Classically, dwarves are known as hard workers. If you're a lazy dwarf, do they respect you, or is your ass going to get kicked out? Maglubliet, yeah, there it is. Maglubli. Anyway, is the big blood-soaked dude from the Cleaver of Doom. He's been murdering off the original goblin gods, but bugbears have their own gods. Hobgoblins and goblins share a pantheon. Yeah, and it goes on and on from there, right? It gets a little complicated sometimes. And my only, I don't want to say, yeah, it's an issue. When you start talking like gods telling or making something that mortals must do, or mortal beings must do, then it's like we get into like the bioessentialism of like, well, the goblins are evil because the god says they're evil, so then that means they're evil, and then it says more about us. So something I didn't bring up about evil goblinoids and just making them evil for evil's sake says a lot more about us than them. And we see this in storytelling when it comes to like Starship Troopers the movie, or Zombie Apocalypse, or movies, or the Terminator franchise as well, where the machines, the enemy doesn't really have a personality so much. It's more about who are we in reflection to the thing that we're fighting. And Starship Troopers was about fascism, and the did the bugs have a personality? No, but it was a reflection of what are we compared to them. And so a lot of that nuance can be lost in storytelling when you just make your enemy just evil for evil's sake, and there's no redeemable value in that. But stories can be told about, well, how do we handle it? And it's the keep on the borderlands. You go into the caves of chaos and you defeat the orcs, and then down in the deep caves there's the orc children and orc pregnant wives, and it's like, do you just murder kill them and walk out and not feel guilty about it, or whatnot? Now, I don't know if I doubt the adventure was made to challenge players on that, but it does, yeah, exactly. But who knows? Yeah, thanks for stopping by. Yeah. Other parts of culture are language and greetings, and I don't mean just language for language's sake. Like, I can speak Goblin, I can speak Orc, or anything like that. But I mean, how is the language disseminated? So language is not just words. It can be written. It can be used with symbology. There's music as well, and maybe that goes into arts. We'll hold off arts aside. But how do we greet each other? Is it the classic, like, my sword hand grabs the other person's forearm, and we start flexing our biceps and triceps or something? Do we greet each other? Going back to the food thing, like, do we drink tea? Is there a vow of non-violence for 3 days? Once you sip your first cup of coffee or something like that. Are there neutral grounds to be made? How do people approach each other? Are there gift exchanges? Things like that. And how cultures basically communicate. And very simply, when I say communicate, you don't have to get too deep into this. You can iceberg it. So um, hellos and goodbyes, salutations, blessings, curses. Um, Gotta have yourselves a bunch of curse words involved in there. Um, a lot of metaphor similes are used in cultures as well, like calling people something because it reminds them of something else, like calling people slugs or dung, or I don't know, rotted bodies or something like that. Like, you know what you are? You're a cockatrice's ass or something like that. You're lower than a basilisk's belly or something. And you can come up with some of these really fun, cool curse word phraseologies. What's the show? Not Serenity, Firefly. Firefly adopted a number of those from the Chinese language, and make up some fun, cool things for your cultures and your world. Now, again, when it comes to like the Goblinoids, you can have various different Goblinoids come from different cultures in your world. So the desert Goblinoids might be completely different than your Arctic Goblinoids, than your coastal Goblinoids, than your jungle Goblinoids, right? And heck, when they meet, they may not even like each other. Like your desert orcs or something might be like orc, Bedouin styled tribes in loose robes and things like that. Whereas the Arctic, could be more like the Inuit, indigenous peoples here in America's hat, up in Canada and stuff like that, right? So, yeah, you can mix and match all kinds of things, like Drew was mentioning about like having a seafaring Viking style culture, and just because the majority of the racial genetic features could be Goblinoid doesn't mean they're all that way. Like every human that becomes seafaring would probably adopt that same culture, despite the fact that mostly hobgoblins sail the high seas, right? It's hobgoblins plus a bunch of other people. Then you get to the question. I've already done a video on it. I might even do it again about all the half races and why there are no half races. Because if you open up the floodgates, then you'll start having dozens and dozens of half races, like half hobgoblin, half dwarves, half tiefling, half halfling, half dark elf, half gnome, and so on and so forth. So the arts and the sciences, and then we'll get out of here. So art is, despite the fact that sometimes pragmatically we don't immediately value art is extremely important when it comes to world cultures. And art is anything from music and dance, sculpture and monuments and that kind of thing, all the way down to fashion and hairstyles and clothing, how much stratification is in the culture. Is it divided by gender? Is it divided, and how many divisions are there? Is it by age, by your position in your culture, what is considered high status, low status, indentured servitude, does it even exist, and how low of a status can people come in the culture till they are they have no rights and they're enslaved or they're exiled? How high in the culture can your status go before you have to kind of leave your culture? Is there some kind of cultural norm where you leave your culture and come back? We have cultures here in the States that do a similar thing. The Amish have Ramspringer. I know I'm butchering the pronunciation of that and the description, but in general, when you become of age, you leave the culture, and you either leave the culture and you stay away forever, or you come back to the culture and embrace it. That very well could be a thing. Talking about the landscape, a lot of times, classically, the Goblinoids lived in the worst portions, were kicked into, either forced to, many times forced to live in the worst parts of the civilized world, often living in like volcanic regions, earthquake ravaged regions, lifeless regions. And we know in human development, talking about the Vikings and such, when you live in a harsh environment, you tend to be shaped by the crucible of that. And so a culture could be shaped of, the stealing, the raiding, the that kind of thing could come from a place where if you don't have many resources, you need to go get it. The easiest way to go get it is to take it from other people that have an abundance of it, right? And so the culture may value or even respect you going out to get those resources to bring it back. And then, then we get into like cultural misunderstandings and things like that. Like, not first of all, we don't want to be raided, but we do get that you're trying to bring those resources back to like a mama bird trying to bring it back to your younglings and give those resources to them. Maybe we can make some changes. But then you get into there is a lived experience when it comes to surviving a crucible, and it's my issue with the television show Yellowstone and Viking culture, the way it's described in media, and cowboys kind of relate to this, soldiers relate to this, where surviving horrible circumstances breeds very tight bonds between the people. And those things can come from environmental effects, right? Terrible snowstorms, droughts, floods, fires, earthquakes, things like that. And the people that survive in those places are like, yeah, like they just look at each other and giving them the head nod, like the chin, like, what's up? Yeah, because we know, because we survive. But on the other hand, when you take people out of that, there can be a bit of a, oh, so you're leaving us. You're soft. You don't value the culture that we're in. And that's where a lot of those, like, I don't want to be a cowboy anymore. I don't want to be a soldier anymore. I don't want to be a samurai or a knight any longer. I'm drawn away to a softer life. And it can be looked at as like, well, you're turning your back on our culture. Whereas an outsider might go, why are you living in an earthquake plain? Like, why are you living in floodplains and Tornado Alley and talking about us here in the States, right? Like, why do you live in a place where you're constantly blasted by hurricanes and fires and drought and all this kind of stuff? It's like, move. This was even brought up in the sci-fi show The Expanse. The Belters were all like low gravity, zero gravity people that lived in space, and they went through the ring gates, spoiler alert, and found other planets that they could take and make their own. And then it was like, you're not a Belter. You decided to, become a Mudviller. You put your feet on solid ground on a planet that you wanted to make your own, and you're not one of us anymore. And it's like, wait a minute, you've been fighting for Belter rights this whole time. Now we get our own planet. Now you don't want that. And so there's lots of like easy ways to make conflict. Heck, a culture that eats purple worms in Dungeons and Dragons might be well respected. Avoids Fire Nation jokes about California. Yeah. I'm not making fun of people's situation. I'm just saying that there is a natural tendency, especially like bringing up here in the States. Like, for example, I don't live in a flood zone, but the Ohio Valley is called the Ohio Valley for a reason, right? We're a big giant bowl. And so we get the tail end of tornadoes. We can get snow, and especially a lot of rain and lake effect snow up north. We don't get that here in Columbus, but you go 2 hours north off of the Great Lakes and they get blasted with snow all the time. And it's like, why do you live there? But there's a respect for that, right? Cowboys and soldiers and samurai and knights, on one hand, they are highly respected, honorable, traditional roles in that culture. From the outside, it looks like your labor is being exploited by people who above you take advantage of you, but you never really get to accept the rewards of your labor, and that conflict will happen forever and ever and ever. The people that will be surviving the fires in California are living through a crucible that we hope will make them stronger and more unified. But from the outside, there are people who are like, well, why would we want to spend our resources to help you move back to a place that's just going to get burned down again? And the easy answer is because that's where you grew up, right? That's where you have your home, and that's where that's your life. So if you've grown up there, it's no different whether you live in an Arctic place besieged by lake effect snow and negative degree temperatures like we're going to have today here in Ohio Valley, or flood zones, or hurricanes and earthquake places and volcanic regions and things like that, which is kind of cool. It just makes greater storytelling, because that's what we're here to do for tabletop role playing games. So sciences, with the art and sciences, of course, talked about art like dance and music and displays of their art display will often tends towards respecting some part of their culture, or art can also be something that points out deficiencies in the culture as well. Art can be very, very it can be used as a method of protest, which is really cool, and can start to talk about things that are problems in the culture. The sciences of a culture are another thing. Is there something in the culture that they respect scientifically and pragmatically? Are there do they not want to engage in certain sciences because they're very dangerous? Oftentimes that can happen like in very short time spans. Like, for example, a wizard that engaged in certain experiments does something wrong, devastates the culture. Now the culture doesn't like wizards, something like that. There could be some sciences could be well respected, meaning like we created an aqueduct and we have schools and books and whatnot, whereas maybe some of those sciences have made people soft, going back to surviving the crucible, and there's a respect given to people who can survive without the sciences and technologies that we have today. For example, maybe the culture respects nomadic culture is still respected despite the fact that the people don't need to move around any longer. So you could have a very stable, sedentary, we build cities and city-states, but part of the culture is, guess what? When you get of age, you're going to take yourself your giant lizard or giant spider or pack scorpion or something like that, and your job is to go out there and become nomadic, because we still respect that part of our culture, even though you don't need to do it, but you kind of want to do it for the respect, right? Because that's how you gain status in our culture. And so, yeah, even cultures that don't do a thing anymore still have that around. I mean, hell, even now, there's whole YouTube channels based on survivalism, television shows, and all kinds of things, even though for the most part, us first worlders don't need to get engaged in any of that kind of stuff. Anon says, when I first came here, this was all swamp. Everyone said I was daft to build a castle in the swamp, but I built it all the same just to show them. It sank into the swamp. So I built a second one. Yep. And you know what? There's a weird, like, we human beings have a weird, like, you're stupid, and we watch in fascination, and then we sometimes honor those individuals too, right? Like, and that's cool. That's really cool, hell, think about our pets, right? Like, I've had pet dogs and cats. Felines and lupines in the wild are some of the most dangerous predator animals you'd ever find. And what did humans do? Did we just run from them and go, we're going to hide in caves? No, we decided to domesticate, no singing, yeah. We decided to domesticate some of the most dangerous animals and put them in our houses. I mean, that's crazy. If we really think about it, that's pretty. If we were aliens and we saw human beings doing that, the aliens would be like, they're fucking crazy. What are they doing? Are they breeding? They're literally breeding felines that are silent predators, and those predators kill things in the night and bring them as gifts. Like, what? and they fall asleep around those things while those predators staring at them at night. Talking about my cat who stares at me at night. It's like, wow. Yeah, and I was like, no singing, no dancing. Your singing brought forth the evils and whatnot, and sometimes the culture could be wrong about that thing. But if any of my enemy is my cat. Yeah, my old Sophie, she's deaf now, which is funny because she doesn't know she's deaf. So then when she starts to meow, it's super loud. I mean, it's super loud. They're like, yes, I hear you, dear kitty. She's like, meow. Yeah, I get it. Meow. It's wild. She's asleep now. Good thing. Although I would love to have a cat cam. I could have a little cat cam next to me. But yeah, she would dominate the show, unfortunately. Although I could make a second channel. That would probably get like millions of views. Just a big old cat cam from a deaf cat that just meows too loud in the microphone. But anyway, guys, yeah, just making cultures is just kind of cool. World building concept, just to come up with things. And I did a video on iceberging. Sometimes iceberging, when it comes to world building, is creating something that requires more information to explain it, but you don't have the reasoning behind it yet. And it fools other people into thinking you know what you're talking about when you really don't. I'm going to use the same example that in some of these goblinoid cultures we're talking about, maybe they wear a long blue scarf or material. And I don't know why they wear a long blue scarf material, but adding that to the culture makes it seem like they're deeper than they really are. It's just an iceberging technique. Now, later on, your players or you may come up with the reasoning why they wear a long blue material. Maybe some wrap it around their necks and use it as a scarf. Other uses it as face covering. Even some may have it as a cloak or a turban styled head wrapping. Others wrap it around the hilt of their weapon, but it's always this like sky blue or different shades of blue or something. And when you come into their culture, maybe someone attaches like a blue piece of material onto their lapel, and the players don't know. It's just like safety pin, blue material. Okay, now you can come on into our culture. It's like, what? Like, what's this about? And your players may never even ask why this is a thing, but the iceberg of those little quirks can make different cultures stand out completely, right? A culture that has scorpion motifs as tattoos may lead the players to thinking, I bet they use poisons and they ride on giant scorpions and they use them as assassination weapons and they, dropping them into people's rooms. Now, you may not have even been like, there isn't a scorpion to be found in sight. Like, we don't so that would even make it even more unique, right? Like, there literally are no biological scorpions anywhere to be found, but they use a scorpion motif, and no one in written history has even seen one except for the motif used. Why? So now, mind you, later on, like I said, as a creative person, you go, oh, this might be the reason why. So iceberging. So anyway, guys, thank you very much for just being part of the show. I know I started a little bit late, had some issues. I'm an old school grognard, and a lot of times when you have like Windows applications and things like that, things work in the background. And of course, instead of doing it overnight like I program it to, it's like I turn the computer on and it's starting to reboot itself, and whatever. If you're old enough, when you have these issues in the background. I just haven't updated myself yet. So anyway, guys, thank you very much for finding the show. More than a little bit. Thank you very much for literally just finding your way back to the channel just to hang out and talk and voice opinions. give me a hard time and whatnot. Yeah. Those things are kind of fun, and we love doing that on this side of the interwebs and whatnot. So cool deal. Anyway, we will have many of these other general conversations as we go forward, and picking up, it is January, so it is a celebration of last year and the new year. And so I love bringing up some of these seasonal the seasonal subject matter that arrives. We always argue about things like hit points and armor class and alignment, and we have to argue about fantasy and is Dungeons and Dragons / Wizards of the Coast / Hasbro being a good or bad shepherd of our favorite hobby and things like that. But remember, don't measure your loves by your hates, right? You can hate things all you want, but let's get more into the things that we love about tabletop role-playing games, and I love it. So, guys, thank you very much. Have a great day, and let's get on out of here with here's an oldie but goodie. Peace and tranquility. Bye.